No one has signed up and I see no one on the phone at this time.
Yeah, you, of course, man. I got it. Easy peasy.
Put this away.
Yep, no worries.
One last thing to keep track of.
I got the time. Can do. Plenty of time.
This morning.
How's the fog?
Yep, it was interesting fog.
Consistent or is spotty?
It was worse on this side than it was on our side.
Okay, it is 12 noon. We'll call the meeting to order. Today is a regular assembly meeting on March 7th, 2022. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Bob,
Here.
David,
Here. Dave, can you hear us all right?
sorry, let me turn you up. Try again, David, please.
Yes, here. Can you hear me now?
Very faint.
Pretty faint, but I'm going to turn up volume again. Thank you. Jay,
Here.
Thomas,
Here.
Jeff, Mark,
Here.
Chelsea.
Here.
Okay, we have a full assembly today with member Kensinger zooming in and the rest of the assembly members are present. It's now time for the voluntary pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, item 3 on the agenda is approval of minutes. We need approval of a assembly meeting from February 22nd, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. So those meetings are accepted with a 7-0 vote. Item 4, amendment and approval of the meeting agenda today. Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make 2 amendments to the agenda on a report of other officers. Definitely before the city manager speaks, but to add a report of other officers, have the chairman of the Public Safety Advisory Board give us a brief presentation. His name is Mark Testoni.
If that's the motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, clerk, remind me when we get there and we'll add that to the agenda. Member Mucci, you have another amendment?
Yeah, under assembly discussion items, the correspondence that we received regarding the Vietnam Veterans Welcome on March 29th of this year at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we will add that under discussion. And once again, Clerk Thompson, please remind me, I've got notes, but we'll see how that goes. So brings us to the agenda for today as amended. Entertain a motion to approve that.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll move forward with the meeting today with the agenda as amended. That brings us to item 5. It's a public hearing. This is a public hearing for ordinance 2022-03. an ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code, Chapter 14.20, entitled Municipal Harbors to increase harbor fees. Any public testimony regarding this ordinance should be given during this public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to participate in this public hearing? And there is no one calling in, right, Clerk Thompson?
Correct.
Okay, with no interest in that public hearing, the public hearing is now closed. Bid awards, there are no bid awards today, which brings us to item 7. This is persons to be heard related to items on today's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to any items on today's agenda? Okay, please step to the podium, state your name and who you represent. And we do have a 5-minute time limit, so.
Good afternoon. My name is Linda Millard, 501A Front Street, Ketchikan, Alaska, and I am the applicant for the property at 1015 Sandy Beach Road. I look forward to your consideration of disposing of this property. My husband is a small contractor. I'm an architect, and he spent a year here building my daughter's house on Sandy Beach Road. When he came back, he said, you know, I really like Petersburg. And as we're starting to downsize our home and our businesses, we started looking for property. And I had heard through many people that we should look to properties that the borough currently owned. And we looked at that one. We're not looking for a really big site. We want a smaller home. And I hope you'll consider that. We were told it would be an outcry auction. And we totally understand that, you know, we don't have any, we're not the only person that can bid on that property. We really like the outcry option more than a sealed bid because we felt that people would have more of an investment in the community if they had to be here for that. So if you don't have any questions, or maybe you do.
Good, thank you for your testimony today.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else in the audience today that would like to speak on items related to today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to item 8, persons to be heard on items unrelated to today's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on items that aren't on today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on in the meeting. Board, commission, and committee reports. There are none. That brings us to item 10, the consent agenda. Only one item on the consent agenda, and that is the Beachcomber Lodge LLC liquor license renewal application. I'd entertain a motion to approve that liquor license renewal.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by member Tremblay, seconded by member Mucci. Any discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Thomas,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Jeff, Bob,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Mark.
Yes. Okay, that renewal has been approved. Item 11, report of other officers. And we'll start with the Petersburg, excuse me, Medical Center update by CEO Phil Hofstetter.
Good afternoon. Just a few updates here. First thing is COVID update. So obviously we're seeing a significant decrease in cases, which is great. However, in the last month, which was in February, we did have probably our severest month. We had 4 inpatients. We had a couple of observation overnight stays. We had a total of 14 days of our inpatient stays within basically how many days are occupied that within our inpatient for a bed. And that's some post-recovery related to COVID. So certainly a serious situation. We had 22 monoclonal antibody treatments in February, as recent as over the weekend as well. So our most vulnerable population, unvaccinated population, are the ones that certainly want to keep mindful of and not forget about as we're on the road to recovery, hopefully. And under that premise, we're having a health fair, and this is something we do every couple of years. We've had to push it off as a result of COVID the last 2 years in a row. But we are going to go forward. It's June 4th in the community gym between 10 and 1. And then prior to that, leading up to it, we're going to have our community lab draws. And those are going to be Tuesdays to Thursdays, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. the last week in April and the first 3 weeks of May. And obviously we'll get a lot of information out there. So get yourself checked and make sure you're healthy and start this road to coming out of the pandemic and making sure we have a good vigilance on our health. Board meeting, certainly something we're advertising a lot here is the March 24th, and that is the search presentation. Thank you to the Assembly for providing the chambers. They will be here. Working on some logistics, determining our COVID mitigation, masking and things like that. We'll have it available with Zoom link, and I believe KFSK is also willing to come in and provide it live. So just trying to get as much information out to the community related to that. And then following that, I'm going to recommend the borough consider a work session annually. We have to do a joint work session. And so maybe it'd be a good idea to think about following the March 24th meeting is to come up with maybe a date where we can have that discussion and maybe discuss some of the things that were talked about at that presentation. That's all I had.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Hofstadter? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Phil, for the report. Hey, can you outline for us how that presentation is going to go with search? Is it going to be like a give and take, or is it going to be, how is that all going to?
Yeah, so we talked about this quite a bit, and our board decided probably the best way is to do it under the agenda and the format of our board meeting. And so at the beginning of the meeting, there's an opportunity for visitor comments similar to this assembly meeting. We have our board agenda. The board, we actually asked assembly and our board and some staff to provide information or provide questions that maybe they can answer and tackle in that presentation to our board. And then our board will have an opportunity to ask questions after the presentation. When I had discussions with search, it's certainly willing to come back again if the need arises. If there's an opportunity to have another more, community engagement level or stakeholder level of a conversation, we could certainly work with search on that as well, if that's the case.
Thank you.
Brimley, you had a question? Oh, okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Hofstadter, for your report.
Hey,
Oh,
Sorry.
Member Walsh.
Thanks, Phil. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering, has search provided any advanced information or like a packet, or do you anticipate them doing anything like that that might be beneficial for the assembly to take a peek at before, just to kind of get more up to speed?
I don't have that sense. We did ask for the CEO to be present, and I believe his format is more conversational, but I can ask that question. And if we do, we'll put it out into our packet, our board packet, like we normally do, and disperse that to the public.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hofstadter, for your report today. And that moves us to the SEPA report. This will be by Member Lynn, a voting member for the SEPA board.
Okay.
Member Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In your package, we've included a kind of a synopsis of the meeting that Carl and I attended all day last Monday. We went through a number of things, and I'm just going to highlight some of the parts of this. But there's an interesting article we included with this package here for you, of an article that appeared, a technical article that appeared in one of the magazines. It's interesting from the standpoint it lays out what we did with that submarine cable last year during the pandemic. And it's there's a lot of inquiries coming in. Actually, I just got an inquiry over the weekend from somebody who wants to come to Petersburg just to go look at this. But some parts of this is we laid submarine cable and pulled submarine cable at some of the deepest depths and longest of a lot of places in the world. Actually, the inquiry I got came from Sweden. They want to come this summer. So yeah, apparently we're getting a lot of requests from, we raised the bar, so to speak, with the new technology with that. And I have to give all the credit to the SEPA staff for this excellent work we've done. Second part is under the infrastructure bill we've talked about. We've applied for through SEPA as many possible parts that we can upgrade our system as we can actually find. Idea behind that, if we can get that money under the infrastructure bill, obviously our ratepayers don't have to pay it. So that's what we're trying to do. And I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but if we were to get it all, it's upwards $30 million type of thing. The staff put up a new website, and if you get a chance someday, go take a look at it. The SEPA website, just if you type in SEPA, it'll come up. What's interesting, the part that's really interesting, there's a table that shows up front. It shows shows where we are, time, end time, like the exact time, how much water's in the reservoirs, where power is flowing, whether it's flowing north, south, what have you, and it's real time. It's kind of interesting layout if you want to go take a look at it. We had quite a discussion on rates, looking at rate increases. We are going to have some more rate increases. There's no question. The discussion that we had was how big and when will these have to take place. And so what the board did was ask the CEO to go back and take a look at when we are going to need to put these in place and how much. The board, I think, unanimously agreed they should be really small increments over time, like $0.25 or less, so that it ratchets up rather than to make one big push. And so that's what that's what we've asked him to come back with. I won't get into the operations plan. That gets a little, and I have it included in the package here. A couple other things that I want to talk about is one has to do with positions. We're having problems here in the borough filling positions. Right now, we have in SEPA at least 4, maybe more positions that we have not been able to fill regardless, and we can offer more money. There just are not people out there to fill. We're actually having to go back maybe and grow some of our own, kind of where we're at. They're just not there. Even that we can offer, we've increased the amount that we were offering from these, they're just not out there. The last item I want to talk about has to do with maxing out power. If you guys probably haven't really looked, but we during the month of January, or when we had such cold temperatures, we maxed out SEPA's power for, I don't know, what was it, probably 18, about 3 weeks, somewhere thereabout. What that means is that if for some reason we were to drop down, then we as the borough have to pick up in our generation and so forth, have to pick up the difference. And I'll let Carl talk to it a little bit more, but where we're at is that the bond issue that our voters approved is really, really important from the standpoint that we need those generators just absolutely tip-top shape, for whatever period of the time that is. We talked about new hydro facilities in some detail, and actually we're taking a look at those. The problem you have is when do you bring something like that online? Because what you do is that most of the time we can get by with like the 2 hydros we have for the 3 communities. But then we have a period of time we really need that 3rd one. So the question is when do we bring that online to bring the power up? Some of the questions we can't answer are, if you go to electric vehicles, how much more power are we going to have? We were showing the table the other day, and again, Carl can talk to more of that than I can. Our power usage in our community and the power usage in both Wrangell and Ketchikan has been going up. It's been ratcheting it up over the last couple of years. And I have no doubt it'll continue. Again, it goes back to the question of how do we plan this? Because we're talking a long timeline to bring this online. And that's kind of the dilemma and the discussions around with the SEPA board and all the member communities or utilities around how we're going to go about this. And that's all I got. Carl, would you add or change anything I've said?
I think you covered it fairly well. Just to underscore that the SEPA administration, they did notice that during that cold spell that the system is pretty well taxed. But in order to bring on that next increment of power, the next SEPA project, that's kind of has to happen. So it makes it very important for the member communities to have adequate standby power in this intermediate time of not quite ready for the next increment of power, but we're getting close. So it's just very important.
Privilege.
Yeah, just could you confirm how many weeks we were at that peak load from SEPA? Was that 1/3/13 or?
We had one solid week, well, probably about 10 days that we were kind of on notice to provide peaking support with our plant. We kind of split that on the north end between Wrangell and Petersburg. But there were cold days on either side of that we were right there as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
If I might just add one
Go ahead, Bob.
part to that is that we can feed power back and forth. And so if one of our other communities went down, then we've kind of have a joint venture that we help share power. And so that helps us get by those times. But if one of our other member communities come down, and we had to bring our generators up, that's another, that's why we really got to look at this in total. Thanks.
Yuchi?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question, I guess, Bob, Member Lynn. So when we're talking about additional power generation, are we talking diesel power or hydropower?
SEPA power is all hydro. Everything we have is hydro. We're looking at wind and we've looked at solar. Wind isn't panning out at all. Hydro is probably, for our uses here in Southeast, would be much better way to go.
Thank you, Bob. So is like one of the first steps, if you're looking for additional hydro, is to find a spot that works?
We have over the 3 years, and I think it started actually when the mayor was on the board, we have been looking all over Southeast here at hydro sites. And we've had, some of this is very proprietary. And we've looked at 40 sites maybe over Southeast here that have different options and all kinds of things. And we're getting very close now to picking down on a couple of different sites now.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your report, Member Lynn. And that brings us to the part of the amended agenda here. We have the Public Safety Advisory Board Chair, Mark Stoney, will give a report.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for hearing me. As you probably know, the police department is at a very critical stage right now. They're understaffed on the police side, and they went down to 2 dispatchers as of, I think it was a week ago, Friday. Person resigned. If one of the dispatchers gets sick or for some odd reason can't perform their job anymore, the 911 system in the town will basically be non-existent. Looking over the report from February that the consultant did, it seems that the pay and compensation for both the police officers and the dispatchers is approximately 18% lower than everybody else in Southeast. And looking at the report, we disregarded the state police. It's a whole different matter with the troopers. But for the communities on the whole, we are significantly behind in pay and compensation. I know this is in the middle of the budget year for 2022 and 2023. Those budgets have already been established, but something has got to be done sooner than later so that the system doesn't crash and that the community is at risk because of the situation that we have right now. And looking at the police department on a whole and the dispatchers, we're trying to find some ways if we can find some money within the existing budgets now that we could spread out to help with increasing the pay and compensation. The other things we've done is we've checked with the state police, waiting to hear back from Lieutenant Fusi about the Fairbanks Dispatch Center helping us out temporarily to field 911 calls and dispatch. I'm waiting to hear back from them. There might be a problem with their system is a little different than what we have here in Petersburg, and it has to do with the repeater. They don't know if they can install a repeater temporarily or what the cost for that repeater would be, but that's one of the options that we're looking at, is to have the state police help us out with dispatch. But right now, like I said earlier, they're at a critical stage, and something has to be done so that we don't, have a risk to the police officers and the firefighters in the community on a whole. Like Mr. Lynn was saying, it's tough just getting somebody to come to work, no matter what the job is. And I think what we have to do on the recruiting side, talk to the chief about this, is that in most communities, again, I'm new to Alaska, so I'm learning a lot. But in the Southern 48s, dispatching is a career. It's not a job. And I think what we have to do is promote the job, promote dispatching as a career, as opposed to just a job. And a lot of it, unfortunately, has to do with, with pay and compensation. But right now, we're behooving you to look at this report hard, some of the options, and we are going to get together with the police chief and Steve to see what we can do to see if we find money within the budget to help us, if we can increase pay to make it more viable for somebody to come in and start training. Any questions?
Any questions of Mr. Testoni? Okay, thank you for your report today.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that brings us to the last item under report of other officers, and that's police and dispatch retention survey report that was done by Manager Giesbrick in the administration. So Manager Giesbrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You may be aware, I'm not going to read the whole report. I'm going to try to hit highlights, but we'll respond to questions afterwards. We did a survey of the officers and the dispatchers to try to get a feel for what are the critical issues. I mean, we kind of know, but it's nice to hear from the folks directly. And it came back very similar to what we thought it would be, which is really, it's two issues. Retention and recruitment for the officers, retention and recruitment for the dispatchers. And they're both kind of different aspects of the same problem. The officers is a more global issue. We're seeing problems with recruiting trained officers down south, in Alaska, just about everywhere. With dispatch, it's local. Traditionally, most of our dispatchers come from somebody here in town, and our job market has been interesting, to say the least. We took that into account as we tried to put together what are we looking at and how do we deal with it. The survey results kind of showed similar problems, which is with employees worried about their pay, both early on in their career as well as, into their career, while healthcare issues, retirement, and support from the assembly came up repeatedly. We, in dispatch in particular, as Mark mentioned about the, advancement potentials, we heard that a lot. That they kind of wanted their own supervisor. They wanted somebody that wasn't a police officer, somebody that, gave, and also with that, I could become a dispatcher and then I could do what? And it felt like a dead end to them. So we wanted to make sure we talked about that. Debbie, Becky, Jim and I looked at issues related to excessive overtime, the scheduling aspect of what they all have to do to cover 24/7. Starting wages, and then the longevity issues. And then we developed two different proposals to address the main issues. Proposal 2 is the preferred solution, as it does a better job of addressing the issues long-term. The proposal does increase starting wages, adds some retirement incentives for Tier 4 public safety employees, and addresses the issue of longevity, which is where longer-term employees find themselves severely lacking from what their peers are paid in other agencies in the state. It also specifically addresses the issue in dispatch of scheduling and advancement opportunities by adding back 2 positions that used to be in the department, chief dispatcher and the support services supervisor. Those positions would be required to know dispatch and would allow them to be able to sit in and step in for dispatchers that want to take a day off or take vacation, which is not currently possible and hasn't been for some time. And it also gives dispatch their own promotion path, as well as a supervisor that's focused on dispatch, not just police. We did reach out to the union to get informal approval and receive tentative support from the union. The project team feels implementing the proposal for both dispatch and officers would fix and help avoid the current situation in both areas. Right now, we've got a bit of a crisis in dispatch. What I don't want to do is ignore the problem and have the same problem happen in the police department where we then have two things going on. So that's, the quick synopsis of this. I'd like to offer up either Debbie and Jim, if you had anything else you wanted to add to what I said. Jim?
Okay, what I did was I put out the proposals to the police department to include dispatch, and the union rep, which is Barb Beasley for the department, her survey resulted in the employees favoring option 2. Option 2 does, like Steve said, it sets out a career path for dispatchers. That's one of the main things. We lost the generation, I believe, that looked at dispatch as a career path. The last one was Lori Steenblock, who retired. She stayed on for a year after I received chief. That was her thank you, I guess, to me. And I thanked her tremendously. But at that time, we had that career path, that career growth for dispatchers. They would look at the chief dispatch. They would all start out at dispatch instead of going 1, 2, and 3, which is only currently like 67 cents difference or something like that. So by eliminating those and just adding in the chief dispatcher and the support service manager, it provides a definite career growth. And where they would receive the bumps normally from 1 to 2 to 3, that also there's requirements for chief dispatcher and for support service manager or support service supervisor. So those coincide with their longevity. So as they progress in their career, it definitely opens up to that. I'm hoping that we can see maybe with the implementation of this, that it would make people look at it as a career instead of just a job. It costs the borough quite a bit of money to send someone to the Corrections Academy, roughly $6,000 to send someone to that, and to lose that person is just throwing money up in the air. On the police side, on the police side, the starting wage was not messed with the police officers, because if we eliminate that police officer 1, the police officer 1 position, that's just one of those positions that was there. I truly don't know why it was there. When you look at it, everyone becomes a police officer 2 at 1 year. So essentially, we're offering a lower starting wage, which puts us way lower than other departments. And then, so they're making a sacrifice. They're paying to move here. They're starting with us. We're paying them a lower wage for just that first year. So I would recommend the police officer just going to a police officer wage, or the police officer job title. And that puts us in comparison to puts us close to it as a starting pay. And then if you look at as they go forward in their careers, you heard some of them talk about incentives for certification, adding $1 to step D, roughly, that's where they would receive an additional certification pay. So that also addresses that issue. And then in step G, there's also, and there was an incentive bump in there as well. Once you get someone 10 years plus, you definitely do not want to be losing those people. You've invested a lot of money, and to lose that experience is detrimental to the police department. And then on both sides, you have the retirement match. So when you're looking at option 1 and 2, people looking at our department, they're just going to look at the dollar figure. That's what everyone does. They look at the dollar figure. Then they'll dive into, okay, what kind of retirement benefits do they offer? What kind of other stuff do they offer? So incentives like that come at 3, 5, 10 years, that's nice, but I believe that the option 2 provides a better recruitment for that. And so when you look at dispatch and police with that additional, actually for public safety, it's not just dispatch and police, it's public safety. So one person in the fire department would also benefit from that. You have the tier 4 retirement is not as good as the other tiers. And then when you have our wages if we implement this new wage in option 2, when you have that, that puts us pretty close with other departments. And then when you add in the benefit for the 6 to 7% match, that I think that is showing that the borough cares about the employees and is doing additional stuff to try and retain the employees. So I would like to recommend that you guys go with option 2 as proposed. This seems to take quite a bit. It shows that there was a lot of thought put into this after listening to the employees and trying to address the issues currently in the police department. This is a step in the right direction.
Okay, anything else to add, Clerk Thompson or Manager Giesbrecht?
So,
Okay, any questions on this report? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have several questions. And I guess they're to the manager or the chief. How did we come up with the incentive amount of money for both the dispatch recruitment incentive as well as the one-time retention incentive for the employees that we have?
We made it up.
Okay.
No rhyme or reason. It was
Nope.
just, we started talking about what's a good dollar amount to put there, and that's what came to the top.
Another question I have is, when is our next union negotiations up for discussion? So with some of these proposed changes, like to the 457 plan, do you, and I know I'm not asking you to look into the future, but do you expect this to be part of the conversation if we are raising contributions to one group of borough employees? Why can't we do it to all of them?
Never accused the union of being dumb. So I would assume, yes, this would come up.
And could you tell me what the support services supervisor would be doing?
Yeah, and Jim, you may have to help me out here if I don't add everything right. A lot of the administrative work in the police department ends up in the hands of spreading out among different dispatchers and even the police themselves. And that provides, a hard problem with consistency because one person does it differently than the other. So it's taking a lot of this administrative work and putting it in the hands of that position. That position also is responsible, the supervisor of dispatch. So literally doing scheduling for the dispatch department, working with the chief, kind of another member of the chief's command staff. So you have the captain and the sergeant, and you'd have this support services supervisor that is going to give the dispatch point of view on here's what works best for dispatch. So it's a lot of the administration and issues related to managing dispatch that are currently being done by police officers will be taken away from the police officers so they can go back to being what they signed up for, which is a cop. What did I miss? Oh, and I forgot the jail. They're supervising the jail too.
Yeah, so the easiest way to describe those two positions would be as if you look at the current structure of the police department, we have the captain, then the sergeant as well. So basically, it's different titles, but basically they would have essentially the same responsibilities, with the support service supervisor being the captain, I guess, on the police side, and the chief dispatcher being relatively the sergeant. The chief dispatcher would provide the training, the input, the correction needed to the rest of the dispatchers. And the support service manager or the support service supervisor does the scheduling. We have TAC and LEOSA stuff we have to do. We have federal regulations we have to report on. There's state regulations, there's grant stuff we have to there's so much involved in this stuff that we have to do, and we have no administrative people to do it. So having dedicated people, it'll make it flow a lot better. Payroll's another thing that both the support service supervisor will be responsible for payroll, and the chief dispatcher will be the backup for it. So we're not having police officers do it on our side anymore. And so I have the job descriptions. It's just we had our servers down and we couldn't update them. So I have them. It's just they need to be updated, then they have to be signed off by the union if this goes through.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just my last question on this topic, we'll be talking about this, of course, later on, but is the intent is not to fill the chief dispatcher and the support supervisor's position until we're totally personnel rich in the dispatcher office, or are we going to address these two issues? What is the plan here?
Sure. Well,
Thank you.
the plan is to hire dispatchers, and those two are supervisory positions, which means you generally doesn't come off the street. And we may or may not have people currently in place that could take those jobs on. So it may be a while before they're filled. But having them available means that Jim can do the job of evaluating the folks he has and decide who's got the, ability to fill those roles. We may have an employee that comes back to work. We don't know that yet. I mean, we don't know how that'll shake out. But no, just because you have them doesn't mean you automatically put somebody in there unless they're qualified.
Just a follow-up question, Mr. Mayor. I guess what I'm asking is that we have two dispatchers right now. And would you look to fill these two positions? I mean, would you open that position and see us having no dispatchers, but we would have a chief dispatcher as well as support soup?
I can't answer that. I mean,
Okay.
that would be Jim's call. And I don't know if the two remaining dispatchers have the right set of skills to fill those roles. I can't answer that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Member Lynn?
Well, a follow-up to Member Mucci's question about looking at the incentive payment. Would you have a problem if we amended the your option 2, if it was on the table, to give you the authority up to a certain amount to make that determination whenever you thought it was necessary?
Talking to me or
Yes,
Jim? Okay,
to
yes.
you.
No, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I love having authority. No, I mean, the reason we bring it to the assembly is because we don't want to violate our, responsibility to you to manage the money in a way that you're, in other words, I ask permission before we do that. If the assembly says you can do those kinds of things, then I'm happy to do it. I'm more than capable of making those decisions. But, I'm not going to just take that on without talking to the assembly first.
Thank you.
Any other questions? The manager? I have one. Maybe we should, for the listening public and people in the room, just talk about the price tag on this proposal 2 and where we can expect to potentially get that money from.
I can do that. Thank you, sir. So there's 2 proposals, both involve lots of money. Proposal 1, if implemented, the cost would be about $199,000. And proposal 2, about $204,000. So say that again.
Annually?
Annually, correct. I can't answer, I can give ideas on how to fund it. I cannot speak for the assembly. So I think the most logical ways are raise the mill rate. We have room to do that. So that's the property tax rate. The borough could take it out of general fund reserves. We are currently holding more money in our general fund than we're really the budget policy document says 4 to 6 months. We're over that by just over $1 million. So that money could be taken out of the general fund and basically do a deficit budget. And the third option would be, even the best of the group, but we won't know for a while, which is the legislature in the House anyway, put an additional $4 million into the community jail program. We will not know in time on whether that gets all the way through the process and the governor signs it. But that's an encouraging sign. The governor's been talking about putting more money into public safety because, by the way, we're not the only ones having this problem. The state's having a huge problem finding people. So, that could solve the problem. I mean, we used to get over $300,000 a year more from the state just for the jail. I don't think we're going to get all 300,000 of that back, but 4 million may help us get maybe halfway to the 200,000. So I think those are some options.
Okay, thank you for
Yes, sir.
explaining the options, just so the public is aware of it. So is there any other questions? Okay, thank you for your report, Steve. And we can knock on the agenda here.
Just wanted to thank also Becky, Debbie, and Jim. They did probably more of the work than me. I just typed things up.
Yeah, thanks for all the work on this in short notice. That brings us to the mayor's report, fairly short today. We're seeking letters of interest. The Petersburg Borough is accepting letters of interest from citizens who wish to serve the community by filling one of the vacant seats on the following borough boards or commissions until October 2022's municipal election. Planning Commission, there's 2 vacant seats. Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, there's 2 vacant seats. And if you're interested, send your letters to Clerk Thompson at Post Office Box 329. I believe that's the right number, yeah, or bring it to the office at 12 South Nordic Drive, or email them to Debbie Thompson, the clerk, at dthompson@petersburgak.gov. And one thing that wasn't on the agenda that I thought I'd bring up, and I've had discussion of this with the clerk, I'll be out of town on March 21st. Whether I'll be able to call in or not, I'm not sure. So Member Stanton Gregor, the vice mayor, will potentially be chairing that meeting. And I'll let you know as soon as I know my travel plans.
Sounds great.
And that's about it. So now we're on to the manager's report.
Hello.
Again, thanks, Steve.
Hello again. Something I forgot off of my report, which is we're having a repeat of our housing meeting on Wednesday at 10 a.m. If you have any questions or want to know more, Chelsea has been kind of leading the charge on this. So she's a great resource on that topic. Thanks to the streets crew, they finished repainting and installing the new deck planking on the large tilt bed trailer. This was a big project, but much needed and should extend the working lifespan of this piece of equipment by several more years. Our recent weather, it's been nice and mild, has allowed us to get the street sweeper into action and get a head start on picking up some of the winter's accumulated traction sand. Our public works culvert replacement project is out to bid, with the big bid opening scheduled for March 11th. And we're finalizing the vehicle replacement and O&M budgets for all borough departments right now as part of the budget process. We're finalizing a schedule for the transition to every other week recycling. Tentative start date for the new schedule will be the week of April 4th. Changing the schedule, we publicly noticed for several weeks beforehand to give customers plenty of time to plan for the shift. Residential customers will see reduced pickups, so every other week instead of weekly. However, most commercial customers will continue to be picked up at the same frequency as before. We are planning to bring back the household hazardous waste collection event this year, probably in late summer. Our past provider of this service raised their prices dramatically during COVID. And we're first going to solicit bids to see if we can find somebody that'll do it a little cheaper. And, you know, we don't know how that's going to turn out yet, but the bid they gave us is substantially more than we've done in the past. So we'll see what we can find. Now that our streets crew is back in the motor pool shop building, that's freed up some space, and we moved Sam Jackson, our maintenance person for the general fund buildings. He's been relocated back to an office in the public works building. Our last COVID case at the Manor, well, my report says February 24th. That's not true anymore. We had one more that happened just last week. Folks do seem to be recovering, although at a slower pace. They're older for the most part. As CEO Hofstetter mentioned, you know, a lot of them have got the antibody treatments and, you know, in some cases spent some time in the hospital just to be safe. But so far, so good. I think things like everybody's getting better. We will be reopening for visitors at the Manor soon. Please call Sheilyn with any questions or updates on the visitation status. Huge thank you to the staff up there at the Manor who were working double shifts and extra shifts to cover during our COVID outbreak. You know, no one likes to have to constantly be tested and go through that. And they were testing almost, in some cases daily, in some cases every other day, to try to make sure we kept everybody safe. And with our continued staffing issues in town, we're going to start making some changes at the Manor that it's unfortunate, but I don't know any way around it. This is grandfathered, so it doesn't affect existing residents, but we're looking at the care plans to limit who we allow in the Manor to care plans 1 and 2. So it's a lower level of care. We can't find people to work up there. And so what, again, has no impact on current residents, but it will affect people on the waiting list. If they're a care plan above 2, we will likely say they're going to have to find someplace else to stay. Our new contract will tell people that move in, if they get to a care plan higher than a 2, that they would have to find another place. It's not a great idea, by the way. I mean, but we can't find people and we don't want to be in violation. We don't want to have somebody up there get hurt because we can't find the number of people that we need to staff the place, let alone the cost of it. So we're working through that process. It's not an immediate thing. We've talked to the state to make sure that licensing doesn't have any issues with that. Sheila is working with the hospital to make sure what impact does that have on the hospital and their, how they do things. And we'll work through that. We'll then go through the process of notifying people on the waiting list. We have 2 current open apartments in assisted living right now. And, the hope is to fill them with somebody that requires less hands-on care. We're getting almost to a point of one-on-one where we need an RA for every resident because of a wonderful thing. People have been allowed to age in place, and that's wonderful and it's great and it's their home, but we can't keep it up. We just can't find people for that. So as you've heard, dispatch is currently staffed with just 2 dispatchers. So Captain Holmgren is filling in. And as of this report, we have no current qualified candidates for the open positions. We were running ads even at a slightly higher salary, and we're not getting any applicants at this point. So we'll keep at it. The police reviewed options for the Axon and Fleet 3 police in-car cameras with Mark Tassoni, Jeff Mucci, and the Axon rep. The rep is providing updated quote for this upcoming budget year. These are in-car cameras that are mounted on the police cars. Several of ours are no longer functioning, and we've got to look for replacements. Property tax assessments were mailed on March 1st. Property owners have 1 month to appeal. More information can be found on the borough's website. If you own a home and have been impacted financially by the COVID-19 pandemic, you may be eligible for Alaska Housing Homeowner Assistance. The program may help cover mortgage payments, past due property taxes, insurance premiums, and utilities. The application process is easy and confidential. Check your eligibility and apply online at alaskahousingrelief.org. The deadline to apply is April 4th, 2022. Our online property map viewer is in the process of being updated with new ownership information and assessed values as soon as possible. Work on the update was delayed due to our server issues we've had recently. McMillan Jacobs continues to draft and refine the FERC non-capacity license amendment that is required for the Blind Slough Hydro project. And Power and Light issued an RFP for the replacement of the Superior Building roof. Proposals are due March 11th. Our line crew is still working to upgrade numerous streetlights to LED, and no applications for the open journeyman linemen have been received. Kind of a repeat issue. We may bring another apprentice on, but that's a decision that Carl's got to think about. Can we afford to do that, or do we keep the journeyman open out there? Men in operations staff recently received industry-specific safety training on PPE, hazard assessment, minimum approach distances, second points of contact, equal potential grounding, and chainsaw safety. NC Machinery will have all the parts for our 399 generator overhaul by the end of March. The work is scheduled to begin during the first week in April. This is part of that, making sure our generators are all in really good shape and can continue to support the town. Scott Burt finished his Ironman triathlon coach certification. Spin bike instructor will also be hosting sessions soon, as well as to begin triathlon training. So anybody interested in trying your luck at running a triathlon, either training or competitions, please contact Scott at Parks and Rec. A lot of this is indoor stuff, but we are actually talking about, what it take to run an outdoor triathlon here. So anybody who wants to swim in the harbor for 1.5 miles, let us know. We can probably set you up. Swim lesson sessions to begin mid-March, and contact Parks and Rec for more information. And lunchtime swim and basketball starting March 7th. Call Parks and Rec for specific details, check Facebook, and listen to KFSK for more details. Not a very long period. We're trying to slot it in between school activities, but it's about a 40-minute time frame right at lunchtime that we're trying to open up for the community. School's got us right before and right after, so we'll see how this goes. Stephanie and her team are working on the maintenance list for the community center facility closure in conjunction with the replacement of the boilers and other repairs related to the electrical fire. Contractors are still on schedule for late spring, and Parks and Rec is coordinating with the school Boilers sound like they might be here any day. They were shipped out of Seattle early or late last week. So we know they're going to be here. Then it's just checking to make sure everything else is here. And we'll schedule this again with the school. And we received a letter from the environmental consultant regarding the Petro Marine property. I sent that out to all of the assembly. His recommendation is to wait until the final report is received from Chevron, and then upon review of the report, make a recommendation on how to proceed. This will be sometime in 2022 after they finish their last monitoring session and see what that results is. And that's it, unless there's questions.
Thank you for your report, Manager Giesbrecht. Are there any questions of the manager? Member Lynn?
A quick question. You talked about the manor. And are we going to have to go through some similar pay adjustments or changes like we were looking at for the police department?
I'm not considering that at the moment. We're considering a different approach, which is trying to lower the care level that we provide up there. There's a lag time clearly. We, with the Manor, we did a, if you remember last year, we did an adjustment to all of their salaries. And then we also hit it hard during the negotiations as well. So, I mean, I don't know that it's a money issue. I think it's just absolutely that it's a hard job and people don't want to do it. And in this labor market, we're just having a hell of a time finding people. So at this point, we're not considering that.
Any other questions of the manager? Assemblymember Tremblay.
Thank you. I just wanted to elaborate really quickly on the housing discussion that we're having on Wednesday, if that's okay. I'm just elaborating on the meeting that we're having, giving some details on who all will be there. So we have individuals representing Humanity in Progress, WAVE, Petersburg Medical Center's Community Wellness Program, Public Health, PEDC with Liz Cabrera, as well as the Borough. And then hopefully we'll also have representatives from PIA as well as the Community Foundation and myself. So that's a lot of partners, obviously, and we have exactly 1 hour. It took us weeks to find an hour where we could all be together. So we're hoping to bring together new information that we may have as institutions on any forward motions we're making on the broader housing discussion. We know collectively that housing across all levels is a real issue. There's crisis housing, affordable housing, single family homes, worker housing. You know, it's kind of an across the board situation. So the goal will be to compile information, ask each other questions, and I hope to have a pretty detailed minutes of the meeting to bring back to the next assembly meeting. So if anyone represents a group or is an interested party, again, I hope people understand why we can't really make this super open to the public. That's already a lot of talk in 1 hour. But if you are an interested member of the public or of a group that feels like you should be in that meeting and you're not, my phone number is 518-0590, or you can email me and I'm happy to keep you looped in on the conversation.
Okay, any other questions of the manager on his report? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like Member Lynn talked about Mountain View Manor, if we were to reduce or just our guests have level 1 and 2, anything above that, are there places in town that could take care of them, or would it be a hospital thing, or would it long-term care, or?
I don't know. That's
Okay.
part of Sheila's conversation with the hospital. Is what does this do? Again, not to our existing residents who are fine right where they are and we're not changing anything.
Sure.
But for these future residents, what does that mean? Where do they have to go? Is it something, do they move to long-term care at the hospital, or do they have to move into home care? During COVID, the hospital invested in some massive expansion of their home health care group. Maybe that's becomes another option for people is, taking care of people at home. But that's why the hospital has to be part of that conversation.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the manager? Okay, we'll move on to unfinished business. This is ordinance number 2022-01, and this is an ordinance authorizing the issuance of electric utility revenue bonds of Petersburg Borough Electric Utility. This is the third and final reading. We'll entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Tremblay. Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Chelsea, Thomas,
Yes.
Bob,
Okay, it's a done deal. Ordinance 2022-01 passes unanimously. I'm looking forward to the day we have our electrical infrastructure updated a bit. Next item on the agenda, ordinance 2022-03. This is an ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code, chapter 14.20, entitled Municipal Harbors, to increase harbor fees. This is the second reading. Just for a side note, the first reading, it was passed unanimously by the Assembly. I'd entertain a motion to approve ordinance 2022-03 in its second reading.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Tremblay. Any discussion? Member Stanton Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, and I spoke to this during the first reading, I'll be voting for this as a harbor user. Of course, no one likes seeing their rates go up, but in terms of deferred maintenance, future costs of maintaining our stellar harbors we have here in Petersburg, this is strikes me as a necessary thing to afford us the great harbors we have. It's, I think, in line with the cost of doing good business. Thanks.
Any other discussion on the second reading of this ordinance? Clerk, call the roll.
Jay,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Okay, that ordinance passes in its second reading unanimously. And that brings us on to new business. And the first item under new business is a resolution 2022-02. This is a resolution approving the distribution of the local government lost revenue relief grant in the amount of $1,430,892. Approval of this resolution will satisfy the grant requirements to submit a scope of work, which includes a detailed description of how the funds will be used to the state of Alaska by March 15th of 2022. Entertain a motion to approve this resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Stan Greger, seconded by Member Mucci. This money came from a application that our finance director submitted to the state. And I'd like to thank her for her work on this. So is there any other discussion on this proposed resolution? Clerk, call the roll.
Bob,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Jeff, Mark,
Yes.
Chelsea.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Thanks again, Jody. Next item under new business is B. There's an application to purchase Borough property at 700 Sandy Beach Road. The Borough has received an application to purchase Borough-owned property located at 700 Sandy Beach Road. As outlined in Petersburg Municipal Code, section 16.12.080, a public hearing on the application was held by the Planning Commission on February 8th, 2022. And the commission has submitted a recommendation to the Assembly to sell the property by sealed bid. Planning Commission report is attached. So I'd entertain a motion to approve sale of this property.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Lynn. Member Stanton Greger.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just as a point of clarification, with this original motion, should we also include the method for it to be sold by, whether it be outcry or sealed bid?
I would think there could be an amendment to the way this was presented on the agenda.
Excellent. Just clarifying. Thank you, sir.
And I would recommend a amendment to do the sale by outcry auction. It seems from the conversation I had with the clerk, and it seems in past history, it seemed to generate more higher value for the city. One caveat to that is that in conversation with the clerk earlier today about other things, including this, if you are a seated elected person for the borough and you can't bid on these at outcry, but you can in a sealed bid. So that's one thing to consider. Why the charter says that, we had that discussion. We're talking about putting it on, we're gonna have it on an agenda to change the ordinance to get it to a vote of the public. So that is one thing that, so both pieces of property would be affected because we have Sally Dwyer who's on the Public Safety Advisory Board, or what board's? Sally?
Planning Commission.
Planning Commission, and we have Member Strand as well. So, or
They're
Nancy
both
Strand.
neighbors to each of the properties.
Each of the
that are-
properties, so they wouldn't be able to
talking about.
participate in an outcry auction, so that's something to consider, but if anybody's interested in making a motion to change it to an outcry, now's the time to do it.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor, just for point of discussion.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Lynn to change the method of bid from a sealed bid to an outcry auction. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor,
Member Kinsinger.
in this amendment, and I would defer to Debbie on this, could we allow, in our motion, to allow Sally or whoever that's a borough employee participate in this outcry auction, or would that violate the charter, even if we made the exception for this auction?
I would think, and the clerk could clarify me if I'm incorrect, but I think that would be in violation of the charter. And
That
she's
is
nodding her
correct.
head, so I don't think we could, as an assembly, make that decision.
Any change to the charter must go to the voters.
Does that answer your question, Member Kinsinger?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So any discussion on the proposal to change it to an outcry? Good. Okay, clerk call the roll on the amendment. Member Mucci.
Yeah, I'd just like some staff direction about, I mean, how do we, Mr. Mayor, how do we include the neighbors without excluding them? Or is,
I don't think we can technically because it's violation of the charter.
Not by outcry auction.
Yeah, they can participate in a sealed bid, but not outcry, so.
thank you.
So I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the proposed amendment.
Okay, and this is to approve the sale of the property by outcry auction, the amendment.
Correct.
Chelsea,
No.
Thomas,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes,
Mark, Bob,
Yes.
David,
No.
Jay,
Yes.
Okay, the amendment to you do the sale by outcry auction passes with a 5-2 vote. And that brings us back to the main motion as amended. And this is to sell by outcry auction, 700 Sandy Beach Road. Discussion on the motion as amended. Member Tremblay.
I thought I'd just share a little bit of where my thought process is because we've done some sales recently by sealed bid and I understand the inclination to want to get more money from the sale, but the particularities of charter creating a situation where the two neighbors couldn't potentially bid on neighboring properties is where I was getting heartburn on the last amendment. So I do think going forward with the sale makes sense for the community and for the neighborhood based on what information was brought to us. So I'll be voting yes, but I just wanted to explain some of my thought process. And if this seems like we're bouncing around between things, that's because it seems like we kind of are when it comes to doing land sales as a borough. But I think that there's some kind of beauty in the mess and that it just lets things come up as they come up per the participating public. So yeah, that's my thought on it.
Any other discussion on this this application? Okay, will the clerk call the roll on the application to purchase property at 700 Sandy Beach Road as amended? Will you please call the roll.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
yes,
Mark,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Chelsea.
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so that will be by sealed bid. Are we supposed to
By outcry auction, I mean?
pick a date? Pardon me?
By outcry auction, I mean, Mr.
Yeah,
Mayor?
by outcry auction.
Sorry to clarify.
Oh, yeah, you were supposed to pick a date and time, sorry.
So, without any objection, I'd entertain a motion to fulfill our duties today and pick a date for this outcry auction. And I would ask Clerk Thompson's recommendation, what would be a good time frame for this?
Okay, so the step after today would be to bring forward a resolution after you guys have made these decisions, a resolution to you to formally say, this is how we're gonna do it at this date and this time. And then we have to advertise and we have to get some title work done. And I meant to bring in my calendar. Hang on one second here. I was actually looking at later in April. Just to assure that there's enough time. And I'm gone a little bit in the beginning of April. So.
Would we have time to do it with the second meeting in April?
What's that?
Would we have time to get everything done and in order by the second meeting in April, or is this something we should do separately? It seems to me like the last outcry auction we had was part of a meeting.
Correct.
Yes, okay, so that would be the 21st of April. I would think, yeah, we could probably have it done by the 21st. That's an evening meeting. So we could do it with that meeting, or we could do it on a different day.
Is that the 21st or would it be the 18th?
It is the, oh, whoops, I'm looking at the wrong calendar, sorry. It is the 18th, you're correct. I still believe that we might be safer actually to do it the week of the 25th. But I will shoot for the 18th if that's what you prefer.
Or should we move it to the first meeting in May, May 2nd, which is only 2 weeks later?
That would be fine as
Just a
well.
thought, just throwing out ideas.
I would feel inclined to combine it with an assembly meeting like we had in the past. I don't remember if we did it before or after, but it flowed well as I recall, so I'd be in favor of that.
That's when we're up at PIA. if I remember.
Yes, sir.
So entertain a motion to have this outcry auction at our first meeting in May, which is a noon meeting, May 2nd. So we could put it on an action item, first action item on the agenda potentially. Clerk Thompson, wherever you think it fits the best.
That sounds good.
Make
So-
it-
Go ahead.
Sorry.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. I'm not sure who did which, but Member Tremblay and Member Mucci. And it was my bad for not doing this in the original part, but at least we're gonna cover that base. So any discussion on doing this outcry auction May 2nd? Clerk, call the roll.
Mark,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jeff, Jay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the next application to purchase Borough property. This property is at 1015 Sandy Beach Road. And we've seen an application, Borough has received an application to purchase Borough-owned property located at that address, 1015 Sandy Beach Road. Same as the last action we just took for property at 700 Sandy Beach Road, I believe. So I'd entertain a motion to approve the sale of this property.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve this by outcry auction, the first meeting in May, May 2nd.
Second.
Discussion on that. Clerk, call the roll.
David,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jay, Jeff,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we will have both of those pieces of property auctioned the same day, May 2nd. Item D under new business, road grader V plow purchase. Public Works Director Cotter recommends purchase of the V plow for the Streets Department grader from NC Machinery for an amount not to exceed $42,776. The V plow will allow for more effective and efficient clearing of deep snowpack. The Assembly approved a supplemental budget ordinance on January 18th, 2022 that included $45,000 for this purchase. I'd entertain a motion to approve the purchase of this V plow.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Stanton Gregor. Discussion. I mean, I remember, if there's no other assembly members that have any input. I remember years back when we bought a snow blower. It was to be mounted on a front end loader, and I think that was an $85,000 purchase or so, and I don't know how many times it's been used. I've never seen it on the street. I heard it was just used once or twice, and then it's been sitting in basically, I guess you could call it storage. I know we did have a lot of snow this winter. And I'm just wondering, you know, I know efficiency is good and keeping the streets open are very important. But I'm kind of kicking it back and forth about this expenditure, and I can't predict the weather, I guess. So that's just my thought process right here. So, any other discussion on this purchase? Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If, through the manager, what will this be doing for this grader?
Chris, jump in if I get any of this wrong, please. So currently we use a grader which has a mid-mounted blade. So the blade is not in front, it's halfway, you know, middle of the unit, which is not ideal for trying to move snow around. A V plow would be an addition, would add a plow attachment to the grader, so the plow would be in front of the grader, which allows for more control by the operator, especially when we're dealing with, and more power, we're dealing with some of the snowfalls that we had this particular year. The mayor's correct. I mean, we have no guarantee that we're going to ever have snow again like we did this year, but we had a heck of a time this year trying to deal with it with the equipment we had. So, Chris, I'll turn, you know, what did I miss?
You covered it pretty well. This is something that we've actually looked at in past years as well. I mean, it is not only going to be helpful in a really heavy snow year, it's going to be useful every year that we have snow. It basically gives a greater, better ability to push through a heavy snowfall. So it is going to help us when we get those 12 to 18-inch snowfalls. But it's also going to give the operator more control when you're clearing things like intersections, cul-de-sacs. You know, if you think about how that grader pushes snow, like the manager said, it's pushing from the middle and you've got a wing off to the side. So it's really hard to dress tight areas with that. If you have a plow in the front, then it's going to be a lot easier to do those detail areas and especially aprons and cul-de-sacs and so forth. So it's a very useful tool during any type of winter we might have.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion on this purchase? Clerk, call the roll.
Jeff,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Mark,
No.
Bob,
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Okay, the purchase of this V plow for the front of our grader passes with a 6-to-1 vote with the mayor in opposition. Item E, police officer and dispatcher corrections officer recruitment and retention. The assembly may take action on the police and dispatch retention survey report discussed earlier under report of other officers. I'd entertain a motion to approve option B, since you have to make a motion on the positive.
Mr.
Member
Mayor.
Lynn?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve option 2 with 2 changes. That we remove as part of those, accept everything except we would remove the item where we're increasing the match to the public service employees 457 plan to 6 to 7%. And the second option I have is to give up under where it's talking about incentive, the retention incentive. I agree with the amount. I would like to just give that authority to the manager to make the decision when and where he chooses and how.
Clarification, who made the motion in a second to get it on the floor? Clerk Thompson?
That was the motion.
That's a motion.
That is the motion to approve.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Sure, I'll second it to get it rolling.
Yeah, I was thinking we might have just made the motion to cover it all and amended to remove.
I was going the other way.
Yeah, so we now have a motion on the floor to accept option 2 with the amendments as proposed by member Len. So member Stan Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just more of a point of clarification. Member Lynn, could you line out where you're getting that language for the second part of empowering the borough manager, or where that, just so
I
you know what I'm
didn't-
looking at here?
It's not in there. What I agree with the amount. I have no problem with. What I want to do is not to make a saying, we here are telling them you must do this. What I want him to do is that based on performance, based on his, his,
Discretion?
yes. And also the chief's discretion, I would assume they do it together, but allow them to make that decision. I don't want to make that decision.
Thank you for that clarification, sir.
So any other discussion? Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I appreciate the amendments to this. I'm not going to vote for this. I mean, I think the city manager, with help of the chief, have come up with a good program to do what we can to try and make the dispatch and the police department more of an attractive job. I have an additional motion that we can talk about after a while or whatever, but I can agree on leaving things to the city manager with the incentive part of the program, with the dispatchers and the police chief, but the 457 increase was part of what we heard a lot of from the employees, and I am going to honor what the employees had to say, and we'll see how it goes. Thank you.
Well, just for clarification, if I'm understanding where we're at in the process, the motion and the second were made with that included in it. This is not an amendment. So if you do not vote for this, you're voting the whole thing down. Am I correct, Clerk Thompson?
That's correct. You could make an
So-
amendment, Member Mucci, to not remove the 457 match to this.
Mr. Mayor?
That's why, just for clarification,
Sure.
it would have been cleaner if we would have
Yes.
made the motion like it was presented on the agenda and then made amendments to it, I think. So now we've got a totally different motion before us that makes it, if you don't vote for the proposed motion, it's different than what was on the agenda, it could fail.
That's correct.
So right now, so I guess we can make an amendment to that motion to add it back in. Member Lynn,
I also would withdraw it and allow somebody to make the full motion,
Start
if that's
again.
the way you prefer to go.
Mhm.
okay, does the seconder of the motion agree?
Yes, I second. I
Okay.
agree.
Yes,
Back
sir.
this thing up.
Okay, so I entertain a motion to move forward with the results from the study about police officer recruitment and retention for option 2.
Mr. Mayor?
Member Mucci.
Now, I have a motion that I would like to,
Make the motion.
okay, my motion is to approve proposal 2 of the police and dispatch recruitment retention report to include the proposed wage matrix, increase the match for PERS Tier 4 contributions to a 457 plan, temporary recruitment and one-time incentive payments for dispatchers, with one amendment that the retention incentive payments be $1,250 upfront and $1,250 1 year later to mirror the recruitment incentive payments to be left to the discretion of the borough manager, and the filling of the chief dispatcher / corrections officer and support services supervisor position in the department for an estimated cost of $204,122 for 2022/2023 to be funded using general fund reserves, which are currently in excess of our approved budget policies.
A brief point of order, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
And please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Mayor or Clerk Thompson, but with this added amendment, we're in the exact same boat we were.
It's true. So what we
I mean-
could do is remove the amendment part, start with just
Till we're in
What's-
discussion phase.
what's put before you, and then make the amendment to change it.
Sure. I'm happy with that.
So we all understand where we're at?
I would second it as option
Seconded
2.
as changed?
No, seconded as presented.
Okay.
The second option,
The
yeah.
amendment. Okay, discussion. And before we move forward to this, I just, this all happened fairly quickly. Over the last couple of months, we called for a study. First couple assembly members wanted to do an audit, and then it got changed to a study done by the administration, which was probably the right thing to do. But if an assembly member thinks it's prudent, and I'm not saying I don't support the police department in this town and doing what we can do to support them and have retention, So we went through the study, we got a copy of it, it's on the agenda, and we're gonna decide this. I would suggest as a possibility, and I'm not, just to throw it out there, that we postpone this to a time certain, potentially the next meeting, so we have more time to digest it. But this is a decision that's being made by the assembly, and without, I guess the public could have come and give input at the meeting. So that's just one of my thoughts, but anyway, I will be quiet, chair the meeting, and let the discussion go forward. Member Tremblay.
Thank you. I'm weighing we've heard now 2 different proposed amendments that I think we're about to dive into. And I when I met with the chief, I shared my heartburn over a budget change that would put us in deficit budget, because I don't think that mill rate increases would be the right call. But at the same time, I see a fund that has grown beyond what we are not obligated, but recommended to keep a certain amount of. We have excess of that. So I see us getting closer to being in a state of rainy days than we really want to admit that we are. And so to me, using that deficit fund to help alleviate a crisis makes sense. So speaking to the proposed amendments, personally, I think that the change to the retirement benefit makes sense. I think that that is something that younger people are having to worry about a lot more. And I would like to see that stay within option B. But personally, I like the idea of the discretion from the chief in consultation with the borough manager as to the incentive pay, and letting that be at a time appropriate rather than a calendar designated date. So those are just my thoughts, and now sending it out.
After we discuss it, we should have a motion in a second. So
Can we-
then-
Yeah, we have that already.
Okay, we did?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We just haven't gotten to the amendments yet.
Yeah,
We're
I'm-
flying
I
loose
was-
here. We're flying loose.
So anyway, any other discussion?
Just discussion.
Remember that.
I see the thing on, the idea on the 457. I don't disagree with the idea. My problem is that we have way more employees than just the police department. And I have no idea what the cost of this. I have no idea what the implications are. I cannot support it as is because I don't know the full program, and I can't support doing it outside of any kind of union negotiations.
Any other discussion? Member Stanton Gregor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Before members of Lanner meet you get into amendments, some looser thoughts about this. One is I don't like it at face value. I've been wrestling with this because contract negotiations come up every 3 years and they're not fun, for speaking for myself on the assembly, and I know for borough employees too. It involves their security and their long-term value to the borough. That said, also, some of the stuff around dispatch and police was, acknowledged in our wage study from several years ago that we are way behind. No gray area, no debate. We are. And we, this last contract made some pretty good chunks to make up for that, but we're not there. If I'd had my druthers, we've been having this discussion specifically about police department and dispatch during the next contract, but I get it. That's not where we're at. Steve has very clearly said this is something, that needs to be addressed. So I can get over my own mental hurdle with that because the direction we were going anyway. This is something that's off the map for us. To member Lynn's comment about the 457, that one is different to me a little bit. And I'm gonna have to chew on that as we get further into the discussion, because all rates or wage study stuff aside, retirement is important to every member, every employee of the borough, in my humble opinion. And I'm wrestling with singling out a certain department to get extra of the retirement at this point, as opposed to tying it into a contract negotiation. I'm not sure where I'll sit on that as we get into it, but there's some initial thoughts and concerns I have, and I'll yield the floor for now. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Member Fine Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I've looked over both of these recommendations and I can't support the plan as it currently stands. Just not enough clarity on where the money would come from. I know there are a lot of departments that would also like, a $200,000 pay increase. They're struggling to do their jobs as well. And as a lot of people have said during this meeting, recruitment and retention is a problem across the board. And I'm just not convinced that this is going to solve that problem, throwing a little bit of money at it. So that said, what I hear about, improving, dealing with pay disparities between this department and similar departments in other communities, definitely something to address. But as things stand, yeah, I just can't support this.
Yeah, I guess, should I make a motion to amend this? Or are we just gonna continue to talk about this or?
If you
I-
feel.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to amend this motion to approve proposal 2 with some type of wording to leave the bonuses to the discretion of the borough manager. In coordination with the police chief.
there a second to that amendment?
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to, as far as the retirement bonus part, be that at the discretion of the manager,
The incentive
the
payment.
incentive pay, okay.
And originally, we were talking about the retention incentive payment. Correct?
Both of those.
Recruitment and retention.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So there's two incentive pay raises.
Different,
Different
not
pay
for the same.
differences, it went-
Correct. Not for the, yes.
And that's what this motion and the
Yes.
second is. So discussion on that, any discussion?
Second. I'll second.
We have
that.
a second.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Member Mucci.
Yeah, I can agree with Member Lind. I think the city manager, if we're looking to take it out of the assembly's hand, but this is more or less the city manager's proposal. And as long as, yeah, I'm happy with letting the city manager and the police chief deal with that. So I'll be voting for this amendment.
Member Kinsinger, you have any input on this amendment?
Yes, I think it's a good proposal, and I thank Steve and Debbie and the chief for working this up. I agree with you, Jay, on that the appropriate time to have done this would have been during contract negotiations, which we just completed. That's my only heartburn I have with this. But I think we're at a crisis point, particularly with the dispatchers. I don't think we have a lot of time to wait. Even if we pass this, as Steve said in the past meeting, just throwing money at this problem might not solve it. So I think there's other things that we have to look into, whether it's scheduling or other conditions in the department. Those need to be addressed as well. But I'm definitely going to support this proposal.
Any other discussion? And this is on the amendment for the incentive.
Payments, correct.
payments, All right, so clerk call a roll on the amendment to take that, put that authority in the manager and the chief's hands.
David,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Jay, Thomas,
Yes.
Chelsea.
Okay, so that moves us to the motion as amended. Are there any other amendments?
I'm going back again. I move to remove from the proposal, the 457, increase in 457 match.
Second.
I'll second that.
Motion's been made by member Lynn, seconded by member Stanton Gregor to remove out of this proposal the 457 match from the borough to the employees. That's correct. That's what it is, right? Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay, member Lynn, discussion?
Yes, just to repeat myself, is that I think we need to be as fair as we can with all our employees, and I just cannot support giving one group regardless the increase without looking at it for all, and I can't agree to do that without during union negotiations. It just, all our employees need to be treated fairly. And this does not, this singles out a group. This is I have a serious hangup with this. Thank you.
Any other discussion on that amendment to remove the 457 match plan? Member Stanton Gregor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll briefly repeat my wrestling match with this part is in principle, of course, I agree with it. Upping that to 6% makes sense, but I can look at other borough departments. In terms of their value to us. Like I can look at wastewater right now, like they keep us alive. That's public safety. I can look at them, you can go on, and I think they're all valid also. The wage part in particular, though, is consistent with the map we'd kind of been following on the wage study we'd done. So pay compensation for police and dispatch, I'm on board. It's maybe 18 months earlier than I would have, liked to fulfilling that mission, but fair enough, we can jump that. But as far as retirement stuff, I think that to me makes more sense to leave that a part of union negotiations. That's all, thanks.
Any other discussion on this amendment? Member Tremblay.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank members Lynn and Stanton Gregor. I think you've helped me consider the bigger perspective on this topic. So I think I'll be changing the larger point still stands that the retirement issue for our younger borough employees is probably going to be coming at us hard at the next union negotiation in 2023. But I agree that letting it be at that moment that we have that conversation seems prudent. So thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on this amendment? Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In regards to the amendment, I'm not going to be voting in favor of it. I mean, I think we've asked the city manager and we've heard from city staff about what makes that, what makes the job, why they are still here. And I understand it's out of the union negotiation cycle, but we've got an issue down in the police department that we're going to have we have a captain answering the dispatch phone. We heard about maybe Fairbanks answering the 911 calls. I mean, we're going to have possibly the chief down there answering the dispatch phone. And yeah, I think we need to do all we can to help that department downstairs. And yeah, I'll be voting no for the amendment. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the amendment?
Yes.
Member Pensinger.
Yes, I'm going to vote no for it too. I understand the problems that this is going to cause in our next union contract negotiation, but I agree with Jeff. We need to have as many incentives as possible for people to consider these positions right now. So I'll be voting yes.
Okay, the vote yes on this amendment removes the 457 match. Am I correct?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
So, yeah. And okay, any discussion on the second amendment to remove 457 match? Clerk call the roll.
Jeff,
No.
Bob,
Yes.
David,
No.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Okay, so that part has been amended to take out of this option 2 or proposal 2. And now we're to the main motion as amendment. Are there any more amendments? Member Stanton Gregor?
Oh, not an amendment if you want me to wait, but yeah, speak to the general motion.
Sure, yeah, that's where we're at.
All right,
There's no
thanks.
other amendments.
Sounds good. Member Tremblay touched on this before in terms of how we're gonna pay for this, and obviously talk about looking at mill rates right now, and I'm not in favor of raising mill rates. Having the general fund reserves higher than budget policy would dictate does give us an opportunity to deliberately thrash this out, how this will work in the future. I think it makes sense to use reserves for this year one. I feel like if we wanted to put that on the mill rate right now, that would be a reactionary move, which wouldn't be prudent to the taxpayers. In my vision, it's just mine, is we take from reserves for year one of this, it gives Jody and our finance department time to figure out, and again, in a deliberate manner, a more long-term vision of how to pay for this as opposed to, just throwing money at it or let's raise rates. And we might end up coming to that place, but I like drawing from reserves for a one-year term to buy time so that Jody can do her job well, like she's done for so many years by being deliberate and thoughtful about the budget. So that's just, I like that part of it right now. Thanks.
Discussion, Member Tremblay.
Thank you. I'm grateful for the nuanced discussion we've been able to have on this pretty complicated topic. It's always nice to get deep in the weeds with everyone. And I would also hope that this year of adjusting to, if this passes, new changes within the department. I remember being on the library board and going line by line through budgets, looking for stuff to cut basically and efficiencies that could be found within the department. And that was part of our role as the advisory board to the chair or to the director of that department. And so, you know, we have a public safety advisory board. Hopefully these positions can get filled and things can get going smoothly again. And hopefully the public safety advisory board could consult with the chief on finding potentially efficiencies within the department to help offset some of these extra costs. Because I agree with Member Fine Walsh that a lot of departments would love this kind of budget change mid-cycle. And they're, not all of them are in similar levels of crisis, but are close, maybe not even close to it, but staring down the barrel at what could happen. So I'm just hoping we can all come together and keep thinking of solutions to this problem. Thank you.
Member Lynn?
Thank you. Listening to Member Stanton Gregor, I was in a different place on paying for this, but I think I'm kind of coming around a little bit. But I think it's something that would be really good to have a discussion maybe on the next agenda, just to see the various ways we could pay for it and what the options might be. Because I'm not sure I understand everything, what all our options are. This is coming so fast. And I think, but I'm kind of leaning your way as not to raise the mill rate, but to see how we could do this and track it in over the next couple of years.
The other assembly members have comments? Member Mucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm going to be voting for this amended motion. This isn't solving the problem. This is just funding a couple of options to try and make the dispatcher and the police department programs more attractive to people who are looking for work. I'm just guessing, but I'll bet you it's going to take at least a year or so to fill those 5 positions, at least a year. And so this is, it just gives us, or gives the city manager the funding to kind of go out and beat the bushes or go to universities where they're teaching dispatch skills or whatever. And yeah, this isn't solving the problem. This is just funding an issue that needs addressing. And it bothers me when we have police officers answering the phone at dispatch, because that's not what they got signed up for. And that's just the way it is right now, but we'll see how it goes. And I'm voting in favor of this at this point. So thank you.
Any other discussion? I appreciate the amendments. And like I mentioned earlier, I wish we had more time to do this. I know it is a critical situation at the police department, the way it's operating right now with 2 dispatchers and officers doing the dispatch. And it's been talked about this afternoon by a couple other assembly members, the funding. And sure, we have an overbalance in our general fund of $1 million. So 204,000 a year, that's 5 years. And my thought process tells me if you give people a raise and you can't, you know, how do you take it back if you feel that you can't fund it anymore? You know, I don't think I've ever seen that happen. Like I said earlier, I'm support of the police department, but I've got a problem with, you know, we just went through union negotiations and now we are here 6 months later and addressing one department's, you know, tail woes, you know, because they can't keep their positions filled. And it's happening all over the country in every job market. I mean, the state of Alaska is 12,000 employees short to fill their workforce. So, you know, you're going to throw the money at it. And so I'm, you know, I don't think I can support this because of those reasons that we don't have a long-term budgeting plan for this. And this all happened in the course of a couple months. And so that's my opinion, or that's my reasoning why I probably won't be supporting this. Not because I don't support the police department. Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Mayor?
Member Mucci, this is your follow-up.
Yeah, thank you. You know, while we might have differences of opinion about whether or not it's a tale of woe or stuff, I mean, we have a police department that is functioning barely.
Point of order here, Member Mucci. It's not assembly members' positions to question another assembly
Sure,
member's
sure, Mr. Mayor.
testimony. So
Sure,
you
but-
just said that basically.
But right now, we have a police department that is hanging on by a thread with dispatch. We need to support what's going on down there and at least give the city manager tools to kind of see what he can do to encourage people to apply for these jobs. So it's, if the community has been used to 24/7 police protection in town, and we find ourselves in a position that the police department, by not maybe being able to do that as efficiently as possible, then we have an issue here. And I think that's what we have to come up with as the deciding body up here, is how to give the city manager the tools to make those things happen. So, yeah, it might not be fair to all the rest of the employees in town, but we have an issue right here that needs addressing this afternoon. I just wanted to say thanks to everybody who's worked so hard in moving this thing forward.
And I will reiterate that it's not the position of other assembly members to question opinions of other assembly members. So with that being said, is there any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Okay, and just for clarification, what we're voting on is approving option 2, using general fund reserves with the amendments, number 1, making the incentive payments at the discretion of the manager, and number 2, removing the 457 match increase.
That is the way I understood it. And also, this is funding it from the general fund for the fiscal year 2022, 2023. That's all we're voting to support at this time.
Okay,
Is that correct?
That's the way I read it at least.
Yeah.
Not that it wasn't confusing.
Yeah. Clerk, call the roll.
Mark,
No.
Jay,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Thomas,
No.
David,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Chelsea.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the motion to increase the officers and dispatch personnel's wages passes with the 5-2 vote with member Fine Walsh and Mayor Jensen opposed. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, item 16, communications. We have communications that we have received since February 17th, 2022. They're listed on today's agenda on our website, and we have a policy to not read those communications. That brings us to assembly discussion items. First item is a police department operations manual. This was requested by member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yep, you've heard me talk about this before, and I know it's an ongoing issue with the police department, but I was wondering if the city manager or somebody had an idea of how that process goes about updating the police department operations manual.
Through the mayor. Police departments often have what's called a policy manual. And that's kind of detailed directions on, this is how we check a prisoner in, this is how we, file a certain type of report. This is how we book someone, among other things. And our policy manual was created before I got here. I think it was stolen from the city of Juneau and then modified for Petersburg. And we've made changes to it throughout the years, including the chief just did recently a whole use of force edition that was well done and put through. Some member Mucci, I think you had asked several times about when are we going to redo the whole thing? And the answer is it's never really a whole thing type project. It's really a living document. We're in a situation where right now we'd like to make wholesale changes to it. There's theories in any career, and in this one, in the old days, the policy manual was very specific. Do this, do this, do this. Today, the discussion is having policy manuals that are a lot more general and rather than specific. And I've asked the chief to look into that, and he's working with other departments in the state, literally the Chiefs Association, as they all talk among themselves, what should these things look like? So I'm confident that our police know what they're doing and that the policies and how they're handling things is proper. To get you a fully redone policy manual is not gonna happen soon, especially without a lot of admin support. So I'll let Jim add in if I missed anything, but it's a project definitely that's on his plate, but I don't have a time frame.
Sure. Thank you.
Dan Gregor?
Yeah, since the discussion item, I might as well lean into it for a second, and maybe it's for you, Member Mucci, or for the manager. What issue are we trying to solve? I know these things need to be updated, but from an assembly level, like, I feel like we're getting near the weeds of micromanaging you, Chief, on what your operation manual is, because that, I don't really necessarily want to know. That's your job, and if it's working, it's working. And so what are we trying to solve right now, I guess is what I'm looking at, if anybody can answer that for me. Besides updating stuff, which can happen at Chief's own leisure.
Since you put this on the agenda, Member Beach, do you have a answer to that?
Sure. I'm not trying to answer any questions. I'm just trying to find out, like we've seen planning and zoning documents that were updated and this, that. I just wanted to know what the process was for updating our police department operations manual. That's all.
Roger, thanks.
I can provide some input. So we update these things as trends change, as different things change. It's like they said, it's a living document. So I mean, it might be working today, but then tomorrow we might have to change something due to case law, due to some sort of incident that happens across the country, stuff like that. That's where the use of force thing just got changed from. One of the things we just updated was the firearms policy, stuff like that. So this thing is constantly changing, and if there's a change in law, we have to change policies. If there's a change in just national trends, we have to change it. So there's, like Steve said, there has been talk about maybe doing less in them. I just received a copy of some policies that are like that, so I've been reviewing those. But trying to combine that with this and with the wage, the retention stuff we just did, with the budget year and everything coming, I can't do that right now. So it'll be in the future.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other input on this discussion item? Seeing none, we'll move on to item B, Police Department Crime and Motor Vehicle Statistic Report. Assembly Member Mucci requests this discussion item. Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is, to me, this is what goes to the heart of what we have going on in the police department. I would just like to see what our, I don't know if the word is crime, but our activity report over the last couple of years, 3 years I've asked for. Just looking at motor vehicle stops, DUI stops, domestic violence things. I put together a long list that I shared with the city manager. And for me, trying to figure out what the needs are of the police department, and if we have enough staff to deal with what the community expects from the police department, this information for me, this is data for me. This helps me figure out what is actually going on in town. I'd like to see all the information, and there must be a way to do it with the reports that have been filed from the police department. I'm not trying to pile work on the police department, but for us, for me, on the long-term staffing issues with the police department, I need to know this information so that if we need to add more police officers, this data will help me understand that. And that's all I'm asking for. And I'm not asking for it over the next 6 months, but it's something that it will, we're looking at stuff in the next union negotiations that I would expect that this information for me will be very important. And I would think that we should be able to get that as assembly members from staff within the boroughs. So that's what my request is about.
Through the mayor. Hear where you're coming from, and Jim will have to answer, how we get that kind of data and can we get that kind of data. But one of the things about a small town police department and dispatch is that we don't really have very good economies of scale. It's kind of like the conversation we had about the Manor, that we could double the number of rooms potentially, but not have to double the number of employees, because an employee working at midnight shift could handle so many more residents than we have. Same applies to dispatch as well as the police officers. They could handle more work during their day if that work came in. But you can't say, okay, well, that means they're not busy enough, so we don't need an officer. Because if you don't have an officer, then the few cases that do come up, there's no one there to handle it. So it's one of the challenges with how do you measure the performance of a police department? Google it sometime and you're gonna have more things to read than you want to know about. Generally, police departments don't really look at cases from a standpoint of how many murders were there, how many, as a method for deciding how much staff you need. They don't correlate well. That being said, I mean, it's clearly an important thing to the community. And as far as, okay, how bad is crime and what does that mean? You know, I'll let Jim fill in blanks there, but from a staffing perspective, the number of crimes we're handling is not the direct correlation to what determines how many staff we have. Anyway, Jim?
Do you have any input, Chief Kerr?
Yeah, so one of the things you have to consider too is dispatch also conducts all the calls for EMS and fire as well. Police also respond to those also. If the world was perfect and I had staffing levels where I'm not currently in the process of filling in for dispatch, this is something I could definitely work on. Outside of that, it's not going to happen soon. You're talking about an annual report. That is something, if I had the staffing, it would be no problem to do. It'd actually be really good for the community to see that as well. In that we would have the number of calls, it would have the traffic stops, it would have the DUI, it'd have a whole slew of arrest stuff. It'd also have community outreach projects in there. It'd have stuff like that. And I have seen those. I have been involved in those, but with the current staffing levels, I can't even think about doing something like that right now. It takes a lot of time and effort to do that, and trying to balance that with dispatch and trying to square everything away. It's not feasible right now. If you just want plain numbers, we can print out plain numbers, but that's not really going to have anything of value. One thing you also have to look at too is the lack of crime in a community like this. The way the officers are out involved in the community, I think our officers are pretty well embedded into this community. People feel comfortable talking to them, stuff like that. So you also see a lack of crime. So you might want to use these numbers as a way to judge their effectiveness, when in reality, you should also be looking at the lack of calls, the lack of crime, because the community feels comfortable speaking with the officers and coming to the police department before there is an issue. So we also have to keep that in mind too when we're doing stuff like this.
Okay, any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Other assembly members? Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you. You know, to the city manager, I'm not trying to judge the effectiveness of the police department. I just need the data for me on what calls we get to the police department are helpful to me. I mean, if we've got 15 motor vehicle calls a year, or we've got 10 domestic violence calls a year, I mean, that's just helpful to me. It's not, the intention is not to judge the police department. It's just to get a better picture of what we have going on. The calls that come to the police department, and how they're responded to. It's not to judge the effectiveness of the police department. And I know they've got plenty of things to do. But I would imagine that we'll be in union negotiations next year, and this information will be helpful to me as we go forward. So it's not judging the effectiveness of anybody. It's just what we got going on the streets of Petersburg. That's all.
Is this a policy of the police department currently, or many police departments that you know of, Chief Kerr or Manager Giesbrecht, that, you know, it's part of an annual report by the police department? My follow-up to that question is, if it's something that the assembly is requesting, I think it should be put on the agenda as an action item to give you direction, Manager Giesbrecht, to have that part of the whatever department it is report, instead of.
To answer your question, it is not uncommon to have crime reports and police reports. We haven't done it in many years, and it's some of it's staffing, but some of it is, it's, you know, it takes a lot of work to do, and weren't really asked to do it. So, you know, if it was not an issue for the community or the assembly, why invest a bunch of time putting it together? Assembly Member Mucci's asked for it. And, I'm not saying no, that we can't do it. It's just, as you heard Jim's response, it's not jumped high up the priority level. If the assembly wants it a priority, then we'll make it priority. And you're right, that would need a vote of the assembly to make that
I
happen.
just wanted to clarify that I don't think it's any of our jobs as elected assembly members to give a department head or the manager individually direction to perform a task. So is there any other input on this item B, some discussion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Member Kinsinger.
Yes, I agree with Jeff. I understand right now that we're very shorthanded. I understand that this is something that's not going to happen by the next meeting or maybe even by the end of the summer. But I think having this information would be important and would be a useful tool for the manager. I mean, if the majority of your calls are domestic violence calls, you think you'd want to have your officers receive more training on domestic violence. If most of your calls are DUIs, you think you'd want to have more training on DUIs. I see it as a planning tool more than anything. And several of the other departments in Southeast Alaska publish an annual report of their calls. It's not unusual. It's done in the region. I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. This should be put on as an action item. And I thank you, Jeff, for bringing this up, because I think it's just something that we need to have some information on that will help us, deal with our shortages that we have now in town with manpower in relation to the police and where we need to put our resources at when we have them. Thanks.
Any other input on this discussion item? Okay, that'll move us to the discussion item that was added through amendments at the start of the meeting. And I didn't take very good notes, but I think Member Mucci wanted to add a discussion item about a recognition appreciation assembly at the school for Vietnam veterans. And I was asked to attend, but I will be out of town. And so there was other emails, and I don't know if Member Stanton Greger would be interested as the vice mayor or any other assembly members, but that's where this is coming from, I believe. So Member Mucci, you're.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we all got this, and I just wanted to make sure that we were able to respond to it without letting it fall by the wayside. I know you're gonna be out of town, but I just wanted to make sure we addressed it. And that's the only reason it's on there.
I don't know who from the assembly would be interested. I suggested, if no assembly members did, and I can't remember the gentleman's name that sent the email, but I did contact him and tell him I would be out of town. We'll see who else could do it. But Member Lynn?
I would be willing to do it, having spent some time in that era. If either you or the vice mayor are not, and other assembly members don't want to do it.
I have no opposition to that. So I don't know if Member Stanton Greger was feeling he wanted to be there, or.
I'd love to hang with Member Lynn at something like that.
There you go.
You would mind sharing company?
You absolutely.
There we go.
So if there's no opposition by the assembly, it'd be wonderful to have Member Lynn and Member Stanton Greger represent the community at this assembly. And I can't even remember the date, late March, I believe.
March 29th.
Yeah. Hopefully we're catching herring then, but I doubt it. So that brings us to assembly member comments. Any assembly members have comments today? Member Tremblay.
Just a quick one to reiterate that we're talking housing again, and I love to talk to everyone about housing. And so if you would like to talk to me about housing, you can email me at the official borough email. It's ctremblay, TREMBLAY @petersburgak.gov, or my cell phone, 518-0590. I see it as an issue directly connected to the search for workers that we are having in the community. You can't move here if you can't live here. So yes, if you have ideas, no matter how creative they are, I want to hear them. So thank you.
Any other Member Lynn?
Two comments. One related to the hospital, our meeting with Surge and the hospital board. All the comments and questions that the assembly had asked previously had been provided to the hospital board, and the list that was sent back to you was kind of a conglomeration of everything from the hospital board and the assembly from our past go around. And if you have anything to add to that, please send them, if you will, to the clerk. And the second item, I want to talk for just a minute from my perspective on the childcare workshop. I haven't seen an agenda, but for me to continue, I have to see a very focused, well thought through proposal. I mean, just to have another meeting, I can't go along with. And anything that would propose to take money or to subsidize childcare out of enterprise funds, I can't support. So just for that, and I'll be waiting to see some very, very focused agenda for that childcare workshop that's coming up.
Okay, thank you. Any other assembly members have comments today? Okay, I have a comment I'd like to make, and there was a situation March 4th where elected officials attended, I wouldn't call it an organized meeting, but there was, so start with the harbor board, there was 4 harbor board members, 3 assembly members, harbor master, people from Petrol Marine at the Petrol Marine Properties, which is a piece of property that we are going to be, I'm assuming, discussing in the future when DEC gives us the report. I drove by and noticed it. Was dropping off something to Marvin. Someone called me and said, "Were we selling the Petrol property?" I said, "I don't think so." So anyway, I looked into it, and it's the discussions with the clerk, and let me back up a minute. And so it was brought up to the harbor board that potentially there was a violation of the Open Meetings Act because there was a quorum. So I appreciate the harbor board chair, Bob Martin, who's in the room today. His email said, and this is the proper thing to do, according to our attorney, is say, okay, we shouldn't have done that. You know, there was no decisions made or anything like that, but to schedule another meeting where it's advertised to the public, and so it's noticed properly. And then, so you could have 4 elected officials there, which is, you know, what the quorum is for a board of 7. So hopefully that happens, because I think people need to be able to go out and have the opportunity like other, you know, anybody else. And another discussion, borough attorney and the clerk and I had this morning was refreshers or reminders on the Open Meetings Act. 3 assembly members is not a violation of the Open Meetings Act. I'm well aware of that, and I think, hope we all are. But there is a thing called a serial meeting, and if one of the 3 assembly members that's in a group like that discussing something contacts another assembly member that wasn't in that arena about that situation, then you're serial meeting violation of the Open Meetings Act. So what we talked about today, I'm not trying to I can't reprimand anybody, I'm just bringing it to our attention. And the clerk and the attorney and I have just talked about it, and if the assembly thinks it's a good idea, if you think we need to take an action item on it, we will, but might just be every time there's an election, if you're an elected official, you get a reminder, you know, like I went to newly elected officials training 15 years ago or whatever it was, and I remember Walsh did it, I remember Tremblay did, and there's great information there, but just a reminder, and especially just a heads up for people that are newly elected, especially the only people that the borough sends to these newly elected official trainings are assembly members, not harbor board members and stuff like that. So I just wanted to bring that up. And so we just need to be cautious, you know, because it's we're in the public's eye. So that's what, any other assembly members have comments? Okay, we're on to recognitions. Any recognitions? Well, I did earlier, but I'd like to recognize Finance Director Jody Tao again for applying for that grant and getting the borough $1.4 million. So that's great. Chief.
I also have one. Saturday, we had the Guns and Hoses chili cook-off. It was great to see all the community support at the Elks that when they showed up. I mean, people were laughing, joking, standing around, just having a great old time. It was nice to see that again. So just want to thank everyone for their participation and showing up and the donations that were received.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of it. Maybe there was an email I just overlooked. Who won?
Police Department.
Oh, go figure.
They still don't know how to make chili,
Have any
right?
chili left so I can sample it? Okay, if there's no other recognitions, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? would have done it.